Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Tuesday, the 14th of September. I'm Derek Clark. I'm joined this morning by Jonny McFarlane. Jonny, how are we doing?
Yeah, good. Bright and breezy. Sort of.
Yeah, it's a bit dreek down here, down in Warrington. I think
It's the same up here in Glasgow, mate. It's extremely grey. There's a bit of fog actually over the city, so I'm high up in the sort of Cambuslang area overlooking the whole city, and it's you can't see much, and it's very, very drizzly. So not a great day.
Yeah, we're well and truly into autumn time, heading into winter. Let's look ahead to the big game on Thursday night. Jonny, of course, Europa League action returning to Ibrox. Lyon coming up against Steven Gerrard's Rangers side. A terrific match to open the group stage campaign, of course. It harks back to memories of taking on Lyon in the Champions League around 13 to 14 years ago now. Before we touch on that, there's been some defensive concerns as to who maybe Steven Gerrard will have available at the heart of the defence on Thursday night, based on the fact that Phil Helander was stretchered off in the game against St Johnstone. Connor Goldson, of course, was self-isolating. We're not too sure if he'll be available. It's a slight worry, you would say?
I think Rangers have got the depth to cope. But obviously, if you don't have Connor Goldson, it is a slight worry, given the quality that he possesses, both defensively and his ability to spark attacks. Now, that's perhaps not as important against Lyon because it's going to be one of these tight games, or certainly Rangers will hope it will be, similar to perhaps how they played against Porto and how they played against Galatasaray. You know, they'll use that mid-block and try and ensure that it's a tight, structured game. So perhaps Connor Goldson's long balls, or his accurate long passes, is probably a better way of putting it, won't be as necessary. But his leadership is just huge. It's just an enormous part of Rangers as a unit. He's the talker, and I think that became really, really apparent during COVID when everyone in the stadium wasn't there and you could just hear what was being said from the players. That Connor Goldson is that defensive leader, even though James Tavernier is the captain alongside him. Those sort of organisational duties fall to the big man at the back. It seemed like Steven Gerrard was fairly hopeful that Connor Goldson would make it. It obviously depends on a number of factors, and you've got a piece on the website about that. You know, depends on whether he's been single vaxxed or double vaxxed, and how long he's been out for. All these factors will come into play as to whether or not he'll be available. But Steven Gerrard did seem hopeful. If he's not, if he doesn't make it, well, we know Leon Balogun's a certainty to start the game, Derek.
Yes.
But it's really then who plays alongside him. And I think there's a bit of confusion because we knew that Jack Simpson's left the Europa League squad, but then it was reported that there was ways and means of changing that. But so we had to dig into that yesterday, and there aren't ways and means. The A squad is what it is, and then there's a B squad, but you have to be a certain age to get into the B squad, and there's a load of criteria that you have to fulfill, and Jack Simpson doesn't fulfill any of that.
Yeah.
So that would mean that, given Phil Helander's looks certain to be out with his injury that he suffered at the weekend, that you'd have to play someone like either Calvin Bassey at centre back, or move Leon or perhaps give a debut to Leon King. But that would be further down the pecking order of things that you might do. But it still brings up the sort of spectre or the memory of that debut by Danny Wilson when he came in alongside Davy Weir.
Yeah.
But I think it was a game. Was it against Bursaspor?
No, it was Unaria. I think you're thinking about...
Yeah, you're right. He played against Bursaspor as well, but it was Unaria. And
I think you're thinking of
that would be...
Cole.
Sorry?
I think you're thinking of Darren Cole. I think he came in for Bursaspor.
Yeah, okay, you might be right. Yeah. Now that you say that, my memory's going. No surprise there. But regardless, of that being a romantic notion and remembering how well Danny Wilson did in that game, I don't think that would be something that Steven Gerrard will want to do. Obviously, you want to have a more experienced player in there. So they have cover. It's just whether or not it would be kind of cover you would need for a game where there's high quality players on the pitch in the opposition who will test the centre backs. Even if it's Connor Goldson, he'll be tested.
Yeah,
because we already know Moussa Dembele is extremely dangerous. And there's plenty of other players. Urar is there, who's a terrific player. Shaqiri, he didn't have the best of times at Liverpool, but he's one of these players. He's just underneath the very elite level as a creative player. But he's more than good enough at this stage of the Europa League to cause serious damage. Got an unbelievable shot. Very skillful player. So you have to really watch some of these talents that Lyon have. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Shaqiri. I love watching them. Big hello to Owen, who's got in touch. Joseph also. Callum says, big game test against Lyon. I hope Sakala, Wright and Aribo get to play up front on Thursday night. Well, that's certainly a left field outlook. That
Sakala, Wright and Aribo.
yeah.
What about Alfredo Morelos? I mean, you need to play Alfredo. I mean, you need to play Alfred. Who's that said that, Callum? Callum, I think you just need to play Alfredo Morelos in these Europa League games. I mean, I've been quite critical of him in these videos. Like just the other day, I was pretty critical of what he's given in the Scottish Premiership in comparison to how he performs in Europe. But I mean, I think Steven Gerrard's alluded to himself that I know why he performs so well in these Europa League games, and I think it's because he's aware that that's him getting put in the shop window, and he's at his best in these games. And when he's at his best, he's untouchable. So I think you've got to get him in.
Yeah, a point we touched on yesterday, Johnny, was the fact that with no Goldson at the weekend, Helander and Balogun were the two centre halves, and they haven't played with each other basically because it's always been Goldson and one other. On Thursday night, it looks likely it'll be Balogun and Bassey, as you mentioned there, who haven't played together, albeit I'm sure they've teamed up together in training, but a Europa League tie is altogether different. Is that slightly concerning?
Well, I mean, obviously, as I say, yeah. I mean, I think you would rather have Connor Goldson in there. I mean, Bassey never strikes me as a guy that's going to be overawed.
Yeah.
He seems like quite a calm young character. I don't know if anyone didn't see that he did a great video about his upbringing in London on YouTube, and he came across so well. Such a humble young guy, and not a guy that's going to be, I don't think, fazed by games. I just think he's one of these guys that just loves playing football and wants to get stuck in. The other thing as well about Bassey is, he's so physically powerful. Even though he's 21, there's not going to be any like power disparity between him and any of the players. In fact, if anything, he's going to be the more powerful of the players. So it's not like a youngster coming in who's going to get bullied physically. So I'd be less concerned about that. It's just more, I think, he's been playing left back a lot, and it's an adjustment to play left centre back, having been playing left back, and then on top of that, it's an adjustment at a much higher level than you're used to. That said, the first time I saw Calvin Bassey, he played centre back, which was for Leicester against a Rangers youth team, and he was very impressive in that position. But there's no doubt it's going to be a potentially difficult one if Connor Goldson can't slip in there. That's the one player that you'd want at the back. Yeah,
absolutely. Hughes got in touch as well. He says, massive game. Watched Lyon the other night, and they have quality players. Rangers will need their A game. We've got a good article on the website actually this morning. Onjay, who beat them from Joshua. A terrific article on there saying how to get the victory over Lyon on Thursday night. It's certainly going to be an interesting contest. There's no doubt about it. And I mean, the other positions, Johnny, you think that they probably pick themselves, don't you, with regards to the forward? I know that Callum mentioned the likes of Sakala, Wright, and Aribo. I can't see that myself personally. Sakala's an interesting one because I know he came on at the weekend, didn't he? I've seen him a couple of times. I just feel he has to, let's just say, bulk up a little bit just to get used to the demands of the Scottish game. I think you've mentioned as well, he's a few weeks away before sort of getting used to the way that Rangers play and getting used to the demands of Scottish football.
Well, that's interesting you say bulk up, Derek, because I think I've talked about this on here before. Mark Hateley bulked up after 6 months in Scottish football, and it completely changed his ability to compete. He realised he was too thin for the rough and tumble of the game. And I think Alfredo Morelos is doing that as well. I mean, I think Alfredo Morelos is probably carrying maybe a stone or half a stone more than he normally would, more than what he might consider his perfect weight, because he knows that he's going to be up in a physical fight.
Yeah.
So perhaps Sakala needs to do that. I think the problem for him and for the medical staff and sports science and all that will be they'll not want to impact his explosive speed, because that's the whole point of Rangers getting him in the first place. They want a player that's just electric paced. But let's be honest, like with Sakala, it's not been a great start. It's been stop-start. He's had issues with COVID guidelines that have kept him out. I think he's had a couple of niggly injuries. He was terrific against Real Madrid when there was spacing behind and he could use his pace properly. And the signs that he takes up good positions. I thought his run off the back of a terrific pass by John Lundstrom towards the end of the game was good. And I actually thought he was onside, or it was incredibly marginal against Johnson. But he should have finished that, to be honest. That was a very, very good chance. At Rangers now, Derek, I've said this again, you're not going to get loads and loads of time. You're not going to get loads and loads of chances under Steven Gerrard. The team's too good. So you have to, if you get 15 minutes here and there, you've got to impress. And if you don't, that's how you're going to be judged, unfortunately. That's the cold, harsh reality of being at a top team. Yeah. And Sakala, I think he's going to have to give a bit more of himself to get anywhere near that starting lineup. It might be that Rangers can find a place for him on the right or left 10.
I think so, yeah.
Morelos up top, Kent on one side, Sakala on the other. And maybe that's the way he can get into the team and start sort of getting a rhythm going. I certainly think he's a wee bit off competing with Alfredo Morelos for the top spot.
Oh, yeah, I agree, totally. Alan Kelly gets in touch. What about Simpson? Will he play? We touched on that a little earlier, Alan. He's unavailable as far as we've had a look. We've investigated the regulations and if he can play, and unfortunately he doesn't qualify, so he's omitted, of course, from the European squad. You can see that article online, Alan, if you have a look at the Rangers review site. Fraser McGill's getting in touch. Scott Wright has to start if fit. We need pace on the flanks with him on one side and Kent on the other. That's an interesting one because we've not seen Scott Wright for a number of weeks now, Johnny. It's a big ask to just chuck him in a big powder keg clash such as this on Thursday night.
Yeah, and listen, Fraser may be absolutely right, and I like that from a tactical point of view against Lyon, because I think they'll have a lot of the ball, and it'll be about hitting them on the counter-attack. But perhaps what we just said earlier about Fashion Sakala being an option on the right side with Kent on the left might be the more obvious one, given Fashion Sakala has had some game time in recent games. So that's what I would put back to Fraser. Scott Wright has been excellent, however, he's just not been playing for a variety of reasons. So I think perhaps if you're going to go with that, you've got Sakala there as a better option.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on a blog that came out yesterday, I think it was, Johnny, from Michael Beale. He's got his own website, michaelbealecoaching.com, where he's released his latest blog, just looking ahead to another Europa League campaign. Interestingly, down at the bottom, he cited his favourite game in the competition as being Porto away. As a coach, he says we played very well that night and should have won the game. It was a night that accelerated our team's development by 20 to 30% as we grew in belief and confidence at this level against a really high quality opponent. So it's a really interesting blog from Michael Beale. I really enjoy listening and reading what he has to say on the game. He's clearly a very talented coach, and it's great to have him in the dugout at Rangers. That's an interesting one where he cites the Porto game, Johnny, isn't it? And how it improved the players, I guess, mentally by 20 to 30%, which is huge. And it just gave them that belief, I guess, that to go to these places and not just soak up pressure and be happy to come away with a point, but to outplay them at times. It's really fascinating. And your Rangers play a style of football that it's alien to what we're used to seeing growing up.
Yeah, it's totally different, isn't it? It's much more strategic and smart. I mean, the Walter Smith teams in Europe that we grew up watching, Derek, were pretty mercurial, pretty much like a roller coaster. You had seasons like 92, 93 that were absolutely sensational. And then you had other seasons that were just disastrous. And teams going out in the first round against opposition that just wasn't particularly good.
Yeah.
And that was with players like Gascoigne and Laudrup in the team. What happened in those days was that Rangers had a team on a way of playing to win the Scottish Premiership, or the SPL as it was known then, but they didn't adapt very well to change for the Champions League and European games.
Yeah,
and they found that quite difficult. It wasn't the most tactical of sides, that, and it was quite remarkable given how, when Walter Smith came back, how tactical his teams were. You know, the disparity between Walter Smith's first and second spells at the club were remarkable in that sense, because it got as tactical as I've ever seen it in that second spell. Up till now, I would say probably Michael Beale and Steven Gerrard. But that game in Porto, it's interesting that you bring that up, or that Michael Beale brings it up, because I think Rangers had more possession than Porto in that game. I think it was 51 to 49. I might be wrong on that. I'm pretty certain. And that was the first time I can remember Rangers going to a real big European club and basically having more of the ball.
Yeah.
And they created a lot of chances. And the other thing was, it was a psychological factor of going a goal down. I think, was it Ryan Jack gave the ball away?
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't remember who scored for Porto, maybe Diaz. But Rangers came roaring back into it and scored a wonderful goal. One of the best counter-attack goals that I've seen in the last decade or so. A wonderful finish by Alfredo Morelos. And from then on, there was really only one team in the game. Porto were obviously threatening, but Rangers really were the better side. And it doesn't surprise me that he's pinpointed that, because they did start to look a little bit more confident after that. And you look at the way Rangers dispatched Galatasaray and Willem II and teams like that the following year, you'd seen an evolution there, because Scottish teams just didn't comfortably dispatch Galatasaray from qualifiers very often, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fascinating blog, and that's an interesting point. I think the other thing that stood out to me about what he said was that Lyon are arguably the most talented squad that Rangers have faced in Europe so far. So I think that gives you a sense of just how much of a challenge is on the way on Thursday night, and how big a game it is. So we'll see if that comes true, and I hope that Rangers can go out there and really perform well. But it's going to be make no bones about it, it's going to be a really difficult game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michael Beale actually touches on that in his blog. He says they're arguably the most talented squad we've faced in Europe so far. And they've got a squad of top players who have the potential to arrive in the Premier League in the future. So yeah, make no bones about it. It's going to be a tough test on Thursday night. But they'll go into the game with confidence. Of course, they are the champions, and so they should, based on, as we touched on, some of the results they've achieved in Europe over the years. Okay, that'll do us there. Jonny, thanks very much again. As ever, remember to subscribe to the Rangers Review now for only £2.99 a month and support top quality journalism covering the club you love. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, folks, and we'll be back